Hey, welcome back. So in this video we're going to continue on with making our blueprints for our cannon, and we're also going to add our projectile. If you've missed the previous video getting this far to get the cannon set up, you can always check it out right here. I'm putting on the Fritz 3D visualization. This is the Rollerball playlist, and you can jump in there. Whole bunch of different things on making this game, but if you don't need it all, just pick and choose, find what you want, because what we're doing is we're making a compilation of pieces that we'll eventually use to create a game. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and get my head out of the way and jump in and get started. All right, so last time we left off right here with the spawn point, which is this giant arrow right here, and it's pointing in the direction that the projectile will go, and our cannon. So what we're going to need to do first, before we're actually ready to jump in and put the blueprints in for this cannon, is we're going to have to make a projectile. So we're going to go back to our content drawer. We're going to go back up to our actors folder, so it's in content blueprint actors. I'm going to make a new folder, and we're going to call this projectile. Okay, projectiles. There probably only going to be one in here, but who knows. All right, so then we're going to right-click in here. We're going to make a blueprint class. Okay, it's going to be another actor, and we're going to call this BP_projectile. And I guess if we end up with more than one projectile, if you decide you want to get creative and have different styles of projectiles, you can name them different things and even change this one's name. All right, so we're going to double-click on that. We're going to open it up. Okay, and then on our projectile, the first thing we need to do is we need to add a collision sphere. Okay, so we're going to type in collision, and this is going to be a sphere collision right here. Okay, and I am going to go ahead and name this one sphere collision, so I know what it is. Okay, and I'm going to actually drag this up and put it here on my root. Okay, a couple things I need to do to get this one set up. Make sure we got everything we need. Okay, so with it selected right here, we're going to want this to come down to our collision. And right now it says overlap all dynamic. We want to change this to block all. We want it to hit everything. So anything that it hits is going to interact with, okay? And that's what that's going to do for us. And that should be it for the collider. The next thing we want to do is we're going to make sure we have it selected up here. And we're going to go ahead and add a static mesh, the little one with the little building block next to it. We'll name this one projectile. But yeah, we want static mesh. Okay, this should be a static mesh component. And then over here where it says static mesh, not skeletal mesh, we're going to hit the down arrow, and we're going to type in shape_sphere. Okay, and this is the one we want. Now when it pops in, it's going to be really big, kind of like the one that you use for the ball and for your player. And we're going to have to kind of reposition things. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to select it, and we're going to shrink the scale down on this right here. Now if we hit this little lock right here, it'll change everything all at the same time. So I can click on one of these and it'll change them all. So I'm going to hit 0.5 and reduce that in half. Okay, now we're going to need to move the location down. So over here we're going to type in -25. Okay, and that should put it right in the center of where our sphere collider is, right there. Okay, so it should be in the center just like that. Hopefully yours is. Okay, all right, so now we need a way to make this move, and fortunately the folks at Unreal Engine give us a component that already does that for us. All right, so if I hit the add button right here, and I'm going to type in projectile, and what'll pop up is projectile movement right here. I'm going to hit enter and leave it alone. Okay, we're just going to use that name. Now I got to change a couple settings here. Over here on the right hand side under details with the projectile movement selected. Okay, right over here where it says projectile, under details with our projectile movement selected, we're going to go ahead and right here it says initial speed, we're going to have initial speed of 500. You can always come back and change this, play around with the speed you want. Then you can even have an initial speed and a max speed. Okay, and the next thing we want to do is we're going to take away gravity. We want this to kind of just float across the screen no matter how far it is. And again, this is something you can always come back in, and if you want to play around with the gravity, check it out. But right now, I'm just going to put it to 0, and we're going to compile it and save what we have so far. Now I'm going to jump back to the projectile right here, the static mesh component, because we're going to want to change the material that we're using here for the projectile. And I'm just going to hit the down arrow, and well, let me look here. Let's see what we got. Okay, so I'm going to go back to content and mega scan surfaces. I have this. That's the color of my ball. So you can use this time to find something in bridge if you want. Let me grab this real quick. Drag it back over here. Something that you want to use for a cannonball that might be good. Let's see here. You know what? I'm going to try this painted copper thing here. Hit the down arrow on that real quick. And then once it's done downloading, I'm going to go ahead and export. And I'm going to go back to my projectile. And with this still open, I'm going to grab that thing and drop it over here. And there's my cannonball. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close this window now. We've done this a few times, so I'm not going to get into high details about how to get materials on here. I was hoping you know it by now. I'm going to compile again and save. Now we're going to jump into the event graph. So right across the top up here, we're going to select event graph. And then in the event graph, it's going to be a pretty easy setup for this one, okay, because we've already got it moving. That's what this right here did for us, projectile movement. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to right click, and there's already an event in here called event hit. Hit. Okay, so we're going to select the event hit, and this is going to be how it calculates where it hit on our character. And then remember, we didn't apply damage because we're going to apply the damage from the hit to our character. And we're going to take this other node right here, and we're going to damage actor. Remember, we have to have a number in here of some sort, or else it won't apply any damage, so we won't get any damage to our player, so it won't do anything to our player, so our game won't reset if we don't have a number in there. And now from here, we're going to go ahead and destroy this actor, so whenever it hits something, this actor cannonball should disappear. Okay? Alright, I'm going to compile, I'm going to save that, and that should be everything to get our projectile set up. So now let's go ahead and jump back over to our cannon. Okay. And on our cannon, we're going to go to our event graph. Okay. And we're going to use this one right here, the event begin play. All right. And we're going to pull off of here. And we're going to go ahead and type in delay. Okay, and we're going to get this delay. And now what we want to do is we want to control what the duration for our delay is. This is what's going to be used to set our fire rate on our cannon. So we're going to come down here to our variables, right down here, and there's a little plus arrow. We're going to hit that, or the plus button. We're going to hit plus, and we're going to type in fire rate. Okay, and this is going to be instead of a boolean, we want it to be a float. We're going to open the little eyeball here because we want to be able to adjust it in the settings details for our blueprint. And this is going to allow us to have different fire rates for each of the different cannons. Once we open them up and we bring them into the scene, then we can go to their individual settings area and change the fire rate individually. Alright, so with that, we need to compile and save. Select the fire rate again, and we're going to start with something like 2. Okay, and up here we have a slider range. Okay, so we could set our slider range from, I don't know, something so like a really fast, so 0.5. You know what, actually, why don't we make it like 0.2 maybe, and then go all the way up to really slow of maybe 2 every 2 seconds, and then I'll have our value range kind of be that same 0.2. And we'll have to see how the 0.2 works, because we also got to worry about our animation and how that sets up too. Alright? Alright. So that gives us a setting. So our fire rate right now is at max, so this is at the slowest. Alright, so with that, now we're going to have to create a new function that's going to allow us to spawn our projectile. All right, so we're going to come down here. I'm going to hit the plus button, and we're going to say spawn projectile. Okay. And for our spawn projectile, got this opened up here. And this one's actually going to be pretty easy. So we have our spawn point. So right up here, this little arrow, we're going to pull this down in here, and we're just going to drag that out. And we're going to need to get the location of this in the world based off of where each individual cannon is set up. So the first one is we're going to get world. This here, get world location. Okay, so we need to know where we are. And we also need to know which way we're facing. So we're going to get world rotation. Okay, we're going to get both of those. And we're also going to probably want to be able to, wow, I misspelled that bad, didn't I? Okay, so we're also going to want to add another variable because this is also an opportunity when we spawn in something to set the scale or the size of it in comparison to how it is set up in our blueprints, right? So we're going to add another variable, and we're going to call this projectile scale. Okay, it's also going to be a float. We're going to open up the eye, compile it, and save it. And for the scale, we're going to give ourselves a range again, so like 0.25 maybe. Maybe we want it to be like huge, like 3 times the size that it is, okay? And we're going to set the value rate the same way, 0.25, and we're going to set this to 3. All right, and then down here, our initial base is going to be set at 0.5, so the default will be 0.5 no matter what, but then we can always set it down to 0.25 or up to 3. And we're going to pull this out, the projectile scale, and we're going to get that as well. All right, so now the way we're going to actually instantiate this is we're going to pull this out, and we're going to spawn actor. Okay, and it's not going to actually have the name that we're looking for. We just want to spawn actor for class, or from class rather. So from class, and we have to tell it what class we want it to be. So right here at the very top, this one right here, we're going to down arrow, and we're going to type in BP underscore and projectile. By the time we get the PR out, it should pop in there. So there it is. So class BP projectile. Then right underneath that, where this little orange input is, we're going to right click, and we're going to split the struct. Okay, we'll put that into there, and then we're going to take the rotation. I'm going to put the rotation in the rotation. So location, rotation, and then this scale right here, we're going to set the spawn scale, and it's going to do a little conversion for us from a float, okay, into a vector, and everything else we're going to leave alone. So we're going to go ahead and compile. We're going to save that, jump back to our event graph, okay, so back to the event graph, and then we're going to grab out spawn projectile, okay, and we're going to go ahead and connect these two together right here. And now we're going to have to do an animation setup, right? So kind of like it's actually more of a timing thing than animation, okay? And what we call this is a timeline, okay? So we're going to pull out from here, and we're going to type in timeline, okay? And it's down at the bottom, it says add timeline, okay? This is the one we want. And we're going to give this a name. We're going to call this cannon firing. Okay, and it comes in at play right here. So make sure you change this, or else it's not going to work right. Okay, so we're going to use the control button and hover over it, get the little hand, and we're going to pull it down here to play from start. Okay, we want it to be on play from start, not on play. Okay, all right. So now we're going to double click this, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add in a track right here. So right here where it says track, and actually right here where it says 5, this is the first thing we're going to do. We're going to change this to 0.4, okay? So we want it to be 0.4. And then we're going to click the plus add track, and we're going to actually add event track, okay? And this is going to change add a node to our timeline back in our event graph. So we're going to select this, and we're going to right click anywhere in here, but if you right click around the line, it'll be a little closer where you want it to be. And we're going to add key to curve, okay? And I forgot to give this a name, so we'll come back here in a second and give it a name. So we're going to select that little blue diamond right there. That little diamond should turn blue when you select it. And we're going to change whatever number is in here to 0. And we're going to change the value to 0 as well. So it should be right here at the very beginning. And this right here, we need to right click. We're going to rename this. And this should be cannon fired. Okay. All right. Now we're going to add one more of these, but this time it's going to be a float. Okay, this is an event. The next one we're going to add is going to be add float track up here at the very top. This time we're going to name it before we move off of it. We're going to call it a cannon barrel location. All right, we're going to do the same thing. It's going to be a little bit different this time. We only added 1 up here. Down here we're going to add a total of 3. We're going to right click, add key to float. Make sure both of these values, the time and the value, are both set to 0. And then we're going to come in here, we're going to right click again, we're going to add key to float. This time it's going to be 0.2, okay, because we want it to be halfway between the distance of 0 and 0.4. So this is going to be 0.2. And we're going to change the value from 0 to -24 is what works for my cannon, okay? Now this number is going to be something that you may have to adjust based on how far back you want your cannon to move and move forward. This is a translation for the cannon to move back and forth on the y-axis, all right? That's why we set everything up to be on the y-axis. All right, and then the next thing we want to do is we want to right-click. We're going to add another key, and this time the time is going to be 0.4, and the value is going to be 0. So it should be a giant V. So if I hover over this down here, if I click in it and I hit F on my keyboard, it should focus in on this and it should look like this. It should be a V. Okay, we should start at 0. If you click here, we should be down around -24. If you're using the same cannon I'm using, if you're using a different model, this is going to be different, and you have to play around with this number to get the look that you want. Okay, and you'll see what I mean here in a minute. And then it should go back up to 0 at 0.4. Okay, so that's all set up. So now we're going to go back to our event graph. After we compile, we're going to save, then go back to our event graph. And now you can see we've added this cannon fire, and we've also cannon barrel right here, okay? So we have these 2 additional nodes that we just added into it. Okay, so we got one more function we got to make, and this is the actual movement of the cannon barrel, okay? So what we're going to do is down here, we're going to add a function. Okay, and we're going to call this set, actually move cannon barrel, sorry. All right, so move cannon barrel, all right, and we're going to drag off from here, and we're going to set relative location. Okay, okay, so set relative location. And it's going to be to the cannon barrel, okay? So we want to set the relative location to the cannon barrel right up here, okay? So when we pull this up, we should have a little cannon barrel that pops in down here. It should be right here, okay? Now, right here for new location, we're only interested in moving this cannon barrel in the Y direction, okay? Because that's how we have it set up in our blueprint, okay? So I'm going to click here on the move cannon barrel, and we need to add an input to it. Okay, so over here, if I didn't explain it, sorry, we're going to right click. We're going to, okay, so right here, we're going to right click. I jumped ahead, my apologies. Right click, come on. Split struct pin again, so we have all 3 of these, okay? We're going to select this one, and we're going to add an input, okay? And this input is going to be, so we don't forget what it's supposed to do, it's going to be move, and I'm just going to call it barrel to limit the length of this. Move barrel on Y axis, okay? All right. And it's not a Boolean. This is going to be a float. So we're going to change it to a float. Okay. And I'm going to connect it down here to my location for the Y right there, okay? All right. And instead of Y-axis, I think I'm going to call this Y direction. All right, there we go. It doesn't matter. All right, so now we've got everything all connected up. We took this, we've hooked it into the Y, we've got our cannon barrel. We're going to compile it, we're going to save it. We're going to go back to our event graph. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take that move cannon barrel out from here. We're going to click and drag that function. Okay, and we're going to connect it up so that when it's updates, it's going to go down into here. And that cannon barrel location that we set, that -24, is going to be fed into this direction for the Y direction. So that's why you need to play around with that number. If the cannon doesn't move as far back as you want it to, or it moves too far, you can come in there, change that -24 to something else, play around with it till you get the right look. Now this will only happen one time. So what we need to do is we need to set this up to be a loop. So I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. And right here where it says cannon fired, that execute pin we added, we're going to click and drag all the way around, and we're going to connect it back here at the very beginning where it says delay. Okay, I'm going to double click anywhere on that line, and I'm going to get this little yellow node, and I'm going to just drag it up to kind of clean this up. I'm going to do that again, so we can kind of see that we have a loop happening here. It's going to come around, it's going to loop around. All right, I'm going to go ahead and compile and save. Double check myself, make sure I got everything that we need. We're going to spawn projectile. Yep. Okay. All right. Oh, you know what we forgot to do? What I forgot to do? I talked about it again. Forgot to do it. This fire rate. Okay. This fire rate. We're going to grab that fire rate. We're going to pull it up here. It should be set to 2. I'm going to get my fire rate, and I'm going to plug it into here. Right. I'm going to compile it and save it. Now I'm going to go back to my level, and I'm going to pull up my content drawer, and I put in this barrier right here, and I gave this barrier, basically I changed it to block all. Okay, the collision preset should be block all. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab that blueprint for my cannon. Come on. Actors, cannon. And I'm going to pull that blueprint out here. All right. And it's really kind of tiny still. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale this up. Again, I'm going to scale my cannon up to about 3 times the size. Okay, so it should have changed all of them. It did. All right, so because I have my little lock right here, all 3 of these all 3 of those are now set to 3. And if I hit play on my, okay, what did I do? I broke something. Oh my goodness. Oh, I changed it to 30. That's what happened, and then it booted me out. That's a big cannon. All right, so let's go back and fix that. All right, so there we go. Now I'm going to hit play. All right, and my cannon should be shooting. The ball should be hitting the wall, and it should disappear. And you can see the movement of the cannon there along the y-axis, right? And that's what we set in the timeline, that -24. So it goes back 24 position. And now to test it, I'm going to get in front of the ball and get hit, and it should reset me back to the beginning. Okay. So again, if you take a look at the model, you see that the green arrow right here is the y-axis. That's what we have it set up on. So that's why it was important to make sure back here in your blueprint we have everything set up to the y-axis in here. If your cannon is not set up on the y-axis, you need to take a look and see which direction it is set up and either rotate it, or you need to adjust the blueprint so that it's along the x-axis, or if for whatever reason it's along the z-axis, let's fix it along the z-axis. All right, the other thing I had mentioned was that once the cannon is in the blueprint, okay, I have the option to be able to change my fire rate and my projectile scale right here, okay? So if I wanted to, I could change this cannon's fire rate down to 0.5. I think that's what I had it at. Or was it 1? Okay. And my projectile scale, I could make it even smaller, but we'll leave it at that. And then if I go back into my content drawer and I bring a different cannon out here, and I want to change the scale on this one to be similar, and then change the fire leave the fire rate at 2, but adjust the projectile scale down even further. Okay. Now if I hit play, we should see a difference between the two. The projectile from the far cannon is firing much faster, and the projectile on the closer cannon is much smaller. So you can see that individually you can change your cannons to have different fire rates and different scales, but you have to do it inside the blueprint or the detail section of that cannon after it's already in the scene. If you do it back in the main blueprint here, it'll change it for everything. Okay, so hopefully that is a little bit more clear. Sorry, this video again, we took 27 minutes on it, but there was a lot to cover. I didn't really want to break this one up into a couple of different ones other than the setup, because again, I like to try to run these through so they make sense and there's continuity. But anyway, so there we have it. If you have any questions, please ask down in the comments section. If you liked what you saw, please like the video and also subscribe to my channel. I will see you next time.